and that we're trying to keep them out of with our stance. So, and that we're trying to keep them out of with our stance. So, we have to understand that as parents, we don't have all the answers, and we need to be honest with our children, and children saying, you know, I made mistakes as well, instead of putting up this persona where I placed myself on such a high pedestal. Now I put into your head that, shucks, I could never do that. So it just pushes me further back.
Right.
As opposed to giving you a hand, I'm actually pushing you down instead of lifting you up.
Well, you know, a lot of people are caught up in trepidation. And so, George, I want to ask you, what can we do to have some of these people overcome the fears that they have? You know, I do know that guns are used for only one thing, and that is to kill. And a lot of the youngsters, not only youngsters though, because we have people in their 30s and 40s that are playing around with guns and doing foolish things. You know, later on in the show, we have this thing that's called a fool in a box. You know, and we're going to talk about the fool in that black box. But we're not going to talk about it right now because I think this ceasefire thing is something really important that we need to get clear and make clear to the young people. You know, guns are only for you to pick up to kill someone. But a lot of people don't think about the preconcussions that you leave on the family after the deceased person is gone, or you went out and done something foolish. You don't realize, you know, how it affects your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister.
That's one of the main components of ceasefire is, say, for example, last weekend there might have been a shooting. Might have been gang-related, might have been drug-related. But typically when there's a shooting, somebody out in the community is thinking about retaliation. This is where one of the components of ceasefire steps in. We have these what are called violence interrupters, who are former gang members, former people who have lived that street life. A shooting happens last weekend. Immediately, these people come into the community because they know there's going to be repercussions and a revenge. They go to the people involved in that, engage with them, and say, there's a better way for us to resolve this. We know that your uncle, your brother, somebody got shot last weekend, but in order to prevent this from escalating out of control, let's look at some different ways for us to resolve these differences. Let's work with local law enforcement. Let's work with whomever we can work with to keep these people from continuing this cycle of violence. Let me give you some facts from ceasefire. Typically, the strategy is that violence can be dramatically reduced within any city where law enforcement members and community join together to engage with different groups on three things. A law enforcement message that any future violence will be met with clear, predictable, and certain consequences. Number two, a moral message, which is where our clergy come in, against violence by the right community representatives. Number three, an offer of help for those who want it. And it just goes back to say that if you want to get with the system, we can help you. Offer of help for those who want it. So everybody doesn't have to stay on this vicious cycle of crime and killing and that kind of thing. We're going to put together some alternatives to that. Ceasefire now, like I said before, has been implemented in more than 70 cities nationwide, and it typically reduces homicides by from 35 to 50%. Non-fatal shootings are also reduced, but only to a lesser degree. So we know, because of the data that we've looked at and because of all the studies around these ceasefire initiatives in all these major cities, we know it can work. We know that the messaging is right. What we don't know is, when is the community going to say, we've had enough, and be willing to step out of what they've been doing to try something new that could work for them?
You know, the community may say they had enough. The community might complain about having enough, but the community doesn't stick together to let everyone know that enough is enough. How many more funerals must we attend?
I heard an interesting story from the Battle Creek Police Chief, Jackie Hampton. Very nice and very knowledgeable man, very committed to law enforcement in this community. But he told me when I first came here in May to start my job as an organizer at Creating Change, he says, George, whenever something bad happens here, this community will typically do something called a rain dance. A shooting will happen, people will get upset, they might even march or protest. He said, but after a week or two, the focus goes away from that, and then next thing you know, we have another shooting to respond to. Right. So one of the things that he talked about when I first went to him, because we met and had a discussion about whether or not he thought ceasefire was a good program. We looked at all the background information. him and some of his lieutenants thought it was a good initiative, but they said it can only work if the entire community will embrace it.
Right.
Instead of doing that typical rain dance, we need the entire community to understand how important this could be and how this could be a watershed moment for Battle Creek.
Charleston, what would you like to see change? You know, and what can we change in the community? You know, to bring all people together for the good of the community.
We need to, first of all, as I said, we need to, our mindset needs to change, because right now, it appears as if we're almost selfish, in a sense that if your kid is having a problem, then that's your problem,
Right.
and that's your kid, and that's bad parenting. But then the minute my kid has a problem, now it's an epidemic.
There you go.
But we need to be just as concerned about every child, every injustice, every act that's not right. Even though it may not directly affect us, we don't understand that it does indirectly affect us,
Right.
and it will be coming closer to us.
Absolutely.
I think one of the things we can do, with your question to those, say, officials, elected officials that may not be doing what they should do, I think we can hold them to the fire. We can take part in, when they have the Ask the Candidate, they have panels, they have things where you can kind of get to know things. We have those open sessions. We can, city commission meetings, city hall, city council, because just like our votes put them in, if they don't do what they promise or pledge to do, then those same votes can take them out.
Absolutely.
But again, that's going to involve the community and everyone as well. Sometimes we don't think problems pertain to us until they land on our front door, and then it's almost at that point, you know, too late. And then some of them people have burned every bridge, so now you want everybody to help you, and we've, you know, burned all these relationships that we had.
Right, right.
So again, it's just a cycle, and we need to get somehow out of that cycle and change our own minds and views, and, you know, not let our worldview be the worldview. But I really think that we really need to be concerned more with others, you know, the neighborhood, the community, as opposed to, as long as me and mine are okay, then everything is okay. It's not, because sooner or later, it's coming to my house.
Absolutely.
So preventive, as they say, an ounce of prevention is better than a
Pound of cure.
pound of cure. So there's some things we can head off, but we got to take our heads out of the sand and wake up to reality.
Right.
I mean,
Very,
you know,
very important.
acting
words
like
there.
something is not there is not going to make it
Right.
go away.
Right.
Right.
Because we have far too many people dying for senseless things, though. You know, and that troubles me, and it should trouble them too. It should trouble every home in the community when you lose someone real young, you know, or even if you lose someone before the age of 50. You know, before we go, I would like to ask Reverend Craig Tantum to make an impact statement for me, so people can understand how important that this really is. You know, especially in a small community where everyone are so crammed up together, I would say. Make a statement for me.
Well, you know, my mind goes back to July of this year, where we had the killings at the Sikh temple in, I think, Wisconsin. Then about a month or so later, there was a shooting in Colorado at the movie theater where we lost multiple lives. Yet even here in the city of Battle Creek, Michigan, since 1968, there are still 83 unsolved murders. Guns don't kill, people kill. And what we have to do is change the mindset of people. You do that by impressing and using a set of standards, moral standards, if you will, to encourage people to understand that we've got to change our mindset. So there's got to be a paradigm shift in terms of how we think about guns and violence and videos and music and all the other things. A lot of that's all mixed together with poverty. It's mixed together with drugs. It's mixed together with those that are involved in crime. If we can get people to understand that it takes an entire village to raise a child, we can decrease the crime that happens in this community.
Good, very well said. And Reverend Trousler, what about your impact statement?
I think on the terms of what Dr. Martin Luther King said, if we don't come together as brothers, that we're going to perish together as fools. Again, we need to all the differences, the petty differences, the racial differences, the denomination differences, the economic differences, all that has to go. And we need to come together as one. And come together, as you said, and say enough is really enough. And until we do that, nothing's going to happen. We can't use this as like sometimes we do in evangelism. I call it drive-by evangelism. Say church goes out one day and they don't do anything else, and they put it on the calendar once a year. Then the people in the community know that you're not really serious. So once we stay to it, then people may start picking up, because a lot of people won't get on a train until it's moving. And someone said, even though God has all power, even he cannot steer a parked car. So if we're parked and not going anywhere, then why would anyone want to get on the train?
Right. I'd like to thank each and one of you for being on the show today. And please come back. You know, we definitely support Ceasefire on the Letammarr TV show. We're definitely going to support this. So I advise every parent to get behind Ceasefire and make that change. You need to make that change. I need to make that change. The world needs to make a change. So I want to thank you guys for being on the show, and please come again.
Thank you, sir, for having us.